when there's an issue with alcohol, there's also an impact on the loved ones, on the family, on the work productivity. It's a set of mental and physical symptoms used to be defined as experienced after a bout of heavy drinking on the following day. Hey everybody, welcome back to the channel, and today's topic is going to be what is an alcohol hangover and why it's important. My name is Dr. B. This is Dr. B Addiction Recovery. If you are new to the channel, we are a nonprofit endeavor. We speak about all things substance abuse and more. If you are so inclined and like our content, please go ahead and subscribe to our Patreon. We also have a channel membership. And those that have been with us, welcome back. Let's get started on this topic. What is an alcohol hangover and why it's important? I want to give you this content in a way that really simplifies it and potentially gives you a slightly different way of looking at it. In our culture, in our society, this stuff is so prevalent and ubiquitous that we don't even think about it and the impact that it has on us. In fact, popular movies like The Hangover, and I think there was a Hangover 2, almost popularized it or put it into our subculture as something that is accepted, and it should go without a thought or a concern. Hopefully by the end of this, I convince you that it is something that has profound impact on the individual, on society, and comes at a great cost. Okay. World Health Organization submitted a few years ago that over 2 billion people across the planet have a problem with drinking alcohol. Okay. That's a large number. Okay. And I believe it was the CDC several years ago estimated that just the cost of hangovers from alcohol is about $200 billion a year. Now, if you add to that the cost of alcohol in general, the disease burden of alcohol, but we should go a little bit further than that, okay? When there's an issue with alcohol, there's also an impact on the loved ones, on the family, on the work productivity, and it affects multiple generations. And I would say that a more realistic number is about $500 billion a year, which is the impact of alcohol. But we talked about just the work productivity is about $200 billion a year, and this number is several years old. That being said, we also don't know anything about the long-term consequences of somebody having chronic hangovers, right? We think of it as a singular event, maybe the next day after heavy drinking, and then you go on about your life, and many people laugh it off, okay? But it is a pathophysiological event, right? And many of these events have long-term consequences, and we may not know what the burden of that disease is. Well, we do not know what the burden of this disease is. Furthermore, this stuff goes back 3,000 years. The first time that it was documented in any kind of medical literature, it was in the Indian medical literature as an issue, and this went back 3,000 years. So it's always been a large burden in society, and there's in fact quite a bit of literature nowadays that you see in the UK and the US that the burden this has on productivity is astronomical. Okay, so we can see that it is actually a major burden on society. It can be a major burden on loved ones and family, and we don't know what the health consequences are in the long run on the individuals that experience this, depending on the frequency. What is an alcoholic hangover by definition, by clinical definition? It's a set of mental and physical symptoms used to be defined as experienced after a bout of heavy drinking on the following day. There's a group called the Alcohol Research Group, and they defined it a set of mental and physical symptoms experienced after drinking alcohol. So the definition was changed, and there might be a little bit of a myth that it occurs on the following day. In fact, it can occur as short as 10 hours after drinking heavily. And when it comes on is also difficult to define, but we do know that when the blood alcohol content, the peripheral blood alcohol content starts to reach zero, or at zero is when you start to experience the symptoms of alcoholic hangover. It's been defined, or has been over 40 different symptoms have been attributed to it, but some of the most common ones are being very tired, dry mouth, nausea, vomiting, headache, and these are some of the more common symptoms that are attributed to it. Additionally, everybody has some idea about remedies to mitigate alcoholic hangovers, and I will say something about that towards the end of this piece. But in general, it's just a large set of symptoms, and they could last quite a while. They could actually last more than a couple of days in certain circumstances. So what exactly is an alcoholic hangover? I mean, what actually causes this? Well, to be completely honest with you, we don't really know. And you should take that answer with a grain of salt. We do have some ideas at the pathophysiological level, but to pin it down is very difficult because it's a complex process. In addition, keep in mind, conducting studies on hangover can be very difficult, and you have to use two different models. You can use animals, but then when you start to use humans, there's the ethical concern. You can't have someone consume a certain amount of alcohol just to see what happens. But there's also a concern for being able to keep track of a person's age, ethnicity, where they're going, how much they're drinking. So study design is somewhat difficult. But for the most part, okay, we can say that there's three general areas that can be attributed to most of the symptoms or the general concept of alcohol hangover. And those three areas are alcohol metabolism, which is what happens to alcohol when it goes into your body. The second one is the concept of oxidative stress. And the third one is your immune response. Now, oxidative stress and immune response are somewhat related because we are talking about sort of a inflammatory process and a toxic process, which a toxic process lends to occurrence of an inflammatory process. And those are the three areas, major areas, that researchers have really brought it down to. Now, let's briefly go over each one of them and not really get into too much detail, just so you understand what it is. Alcohol metabolism simply means what happens to the alcohol as far as how it's processed in your body. And as most of you know, it's processed by the liver, and it has a very simple route where there's two enzymes, and depending on the makeup of those enzymes and the rate of metabolism and the backing up of toxic intermediaries, that could be a major contributor to alcoholic hangover. Okay, I don't need to go, and I don't plan on going into acetate, acetaldehyde, and the way this enzymes and how they work, alcohol dehydrogenase. But the metabolism of the alcohol itself and the rate of that metabolism, how fast you are processing it and getting rid of it, seems to have a lot to do with it. In addition, don't forget genetic factors contribute to that, because different people of different races may be able to process certain elements through that pathway at different rates. So when you're processing this and detoxifying the alcohol for you to pee it out, some of the metabolites can get backed up, okay? The rate of this also has a lot to do with it. Just so you know, in general, there's three pathways that process alcohol in your body, and they account for probably over 90% of alcohol metabolism. Oxidative stress, it's really, to really put it in a simple way where you can conceptualize and think of it, is this. As you are metabolizing, breaking down the alcohol into its individual components, there is leftover molecules in that process. And these molecules are sometimes referred to as reactive oxygen species. In short, these are highly toxic and energetic molecules that can wreak havoc way down at the cellular and molecular system in your body. And it's basically, you can think of it as creating radioactivity in your body at a high rate. Okay, that is not a good thing in general, right? Oxidative stress is not a good thing in your body, and in fact, many concepts and constructs in developing a healthy self have to do with the oxidative stress in your body. And finally, your immune response. As you know, your immune system is that part of your body that turns on anything that it thinks is foreign or toxic and tries to get rid of it. Well, that immune response also takes quite a bit of energy, and that itself can create and wreak havoc. For example, many of you have heard autoimmune diseases, Crohn's disease, multiple sclerosis, and so forth. These are immune responses that have gone nuts. And so you end up getting a disease that has to do with the very system that's supposed to protect you from development of disease. So these three areas, right? Alcohol metabolism, the rate of the metabolism, in addition to the oxidative stress, which is little tiny nuclear bombs created through side products of this metabolism, in addition to the immune response to drinking or to metabolizing these products. Somewhere in there seems to lie the answer to what is an alcoholic hangover. Now, add to that the variations of genetic predisposition, male, female, age, other diseases that the person may have, and you start to see quite a bit of variation. And so that's where it lies. And now the question becomes, how can you, and it's sort of this is where it's sort of an interesting question. The very question itself may seem unethical to some, because there's quite a bit of research going on in mitigating alcoholic hangovers, which essentially means trying to stop something so that a person can be more productive the next day. Or are you trying to stop something so the person can drink without the side effects that one incurs on the following day? That itself is an interesting question, but there is quite a bit of research on mitigating alcoholic hangovers, and many people have home recipes or things different people take to be able to mitigate the hangover. Well, the research shows, and I think I looked at a 2019 kind of a meta-analysis, that a lot of these remedies that we discuss or that people take, there are some that work for some of the symptoms of alcoholic hangover, but there's no remedy that takes care of the constellation of symptoms a person may experience. And I am going to, I'm not going to discuss some of these home remedies, and mainly because even those home remedies, I think one of them was Korean ginseng or something like that. But the issue with those home remedies is none of them have been put through very rigorous testing. There are small studies that look at them, and you can look them up yourself. But the question of taking any one thing that addresses all of the symptoms of an alcohol hangover, it doesn't exist. Some of these things seem to mitigate some of the symptoms. Certainly, hydration and staying well hydrated helps. I can say this, the number one way to stop an alcohol hangover is to not drink. And alcohol is quite interesting because although it's thought of as a sedative hypnotic, it's actually not just the sedative hypnotic. It has multiple effects acutely during the route of intoxication in an evening, and it creates situation where a person can become violent, impulsive, grandiose, risk-taking, and a lot of additional side effects and consequences occur from acute drinking. One of the things that happens is there's a quite of impact also on your neurocognitive capacity, which makes on the next day with alcoholic hangover. And we're not even just talking about being acutely intoxicated. And this is something I didn't mention. When you're talking about work the next day and operating heavy machinery, not only do you feel lousy and you don't want to go to work, on a lot of your motor function testing, a lot of the neurocognitive testing, people have a declined score, and that means there's an increased risk for accidents. In a nutshell, alcoholic hangover, we don't specifically know what it is. It seems to be a series of biochemical events that are related to each other, but it is hard to completely capture the whole thing. There doesn't seem to be one home remedy that mitigates all of the symptoms. And furthermore, there is a huge impact and cost to society, both in terms of work-related productivity and obviously immediate health consequences, but long-term health consequences we don't know anything about. And the best way to stop an alcohol hangover is to not drink. I hope that was helpful. I tried to not go into any details about the biochemistry of it, just to make it simple. You can look up some of the home remedies. I chose not to name the few that were looked at in studies. If you like this video, please click subscribe and like and see some of our other videos. Feel free to contribute to Patreon, and I will see you all next time. Thank you.